We get Auburn and Ole Miss for the third time this season.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, this is a crossover edition of Locked On Auburn and Locked On Ole Miss. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. He's Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss. I'm Zach Blackerby, host of Locked On Auburn. And Stephen, we don't get to play each other in football anymore, but we do get to play each other in basketball a ton. I guess that's what's making up for it. Thanks, Chris Beard and Bruce Pearl, for that.
Yeah, kind of every other week, they just kind of get together and Auburn wins the game and we go about our business.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously the one in Oxford was, I think it was closer than what the final score said. I think the one in Neville, it was probably even a bigger beatdown than what the score said. And then we'll see what happens Friday at noon Central as Auburn and Ole Miss battle in the SEC tournament. So, I mean, this is an interesting one because going into it, everybody asked like, okay, Auburn gets this double bye. And it's like, who would you rather play? And it was this nice split of people saying like, well, Auburn's they've done a decent job with Ole Miss up to this point. So why not take them on again? Versus I was in the camp of, I would rather have played Arkansas because it would have been their third game in 3 days. And that's just tough. That's just tough to deal with. And Arkansas ran out of gas against Ole Miss. So I think if they would have pulled that out, it would have been very lopsided in favor of the Tigers. But that's not what we have. We have Ole Miss, who is like, we were talking before we clicked record, Stephen, like an interesting team, like a super interesting team when you look at their path to where they are today.
Yeah, not every team can say they won on a buzzer beater against LSU, a last-second shot against Oklahoma, a last-second shot against Arkansas. Ole Miss legitimately could have been a team that 7 wins in the SEC if it went the other direction. Now, A&M last second beat them and all of that. When I know that we can't play that game, but Ole Miss is a team that does pretty well if they have an opportunity to get you in winning time. And I think that's the key in this game, especially with the break and with all the bad feelings with the Auburn Tigers. Ole Miss needs to be in the game with 5 minutes to go. Sure. And if that winning time can take over on a neutral site, all of the neutrals, you have to figure the Kentucky people are still going to be in town at that point, talking about what's going on. But they're going to start rooting for Ole Miss because Ole Miss has a chance to be the underdog of this tournament because nobody's going to root for Texas.
That's true. That's true. I do think Ole Miss is kind of playing with house money at this point. I think, usually when you get that single bye, it's like, can you just get one win? Okay. Ole Miss is sitting pretty. I don't really think you could do a whole lot in the SEC tournament to change your seed line. That's just, they say that they care about conference tournaments, but it just doesn't really seem like that's actually true each and every year when the selection committee kind of drops the bracket. So we'll see. And, if you beat a number 1 seed like Auburn is right now, does that help Ole Miss? But something I've talked about all week on Locked On Auburn, Stephen, is like, what version of this Auburn Tigers team do we get? Because from a narrative standpoint, people are talking about how they lost the last 2 games of the regular season, but one was like right after a clinch. It was on the road. They rested Denver Jones. Like A&M really needed a win. They'd lost like several in a row. Like, I'm okay looking past that one. And then they're acting like they lost to like a South Carolina team. They didn't. They lost at the last second to Alabama, who I think is a top 3 team in college basketball. I think they're very, very good. So there's this discussion that Auburn's just fallen off. And like, I don't think that's the case. And I think they're going to want to do everything they possibly can to prove people wrong. And like, I think Ole Miss is going to get the best version of Auburn on Friday.
Well, that's usually the way this works. It seems like every time Ole Miss and Auburn play, Ole Miss gets the best version of Auburn. They shoot the lights out and all of that stuff.
Sure.
But Auburn doesn't need to lose to Ole Miss because the reality is the optics going into Selection Sunday with a 3-game losing streak. That is the type of stuff to where all of a sudden you're not the number 1 seed in college basketball. You're the number 3 or number 4 seed, and that's going to make the 2 line a little bit better. Everything's going to look a little bit different. Ole Miss, I think they needed to beat Arkansas, but at the end of the day, if Ole Miss would have went home, I would have been fine with it because I think Ole Miss is in that Goldilocks zone right now of being a 6 or a 7 seed in the tournament.
Yeah.
And the 6 and the 7 seed means you get to avoid the 1 seed all the way until the Elite 8. at the earliest. And Ole Miss matches up very well with the 2 line and below. The 1 line, though, has been problematic for the Ole Miss Rebels this year, but because Ole Miss already has a win against Tennessee, against Alabama this season, if they're going to land on the 2 line, and they would match up with them. But the worst case scenario for Ole Miss, I told everybody on my show, was ending up in that 8-9 game, to where if you win the first round game, you end up having to play Auburn or Florida or Duke or something like that.
Houston, sure.
Duke right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. And I think that makes a ton of sense. And that's where I see some people putting Ole Miss. So we'll see if this win today changes that at all. But Ole Miss, I think, does have the makeup of, like, I don't think they're going to win the SEC tournament, Stephen, but I do think they have the makeup to beat some teams in the NCAA tournament. I think Ole Miss is constructed in a way where they can go on a run. I mean, kind of quietly, what are they in conference play? They're 10-8 in conference play. That's not counting today, correct?
That's not counting today. They're 11 wins if you count them today.
Yeah, 11 wins in SEC play. And like Ole Miss, I think, is like middle of the pack, slightly above average when it comes to SEC. But when you spread out the entire field, the field of 68, I mean, Ole Miss is going to be, I think, one of the better teams as far as resume goes, just by nature of winning double digits in this conference. And I think they have a shot to do something in March. I really do.
Yeah, Ole Miss played Louisville in their barn in November and December. Ole Miss won by 25 at Louisville. Ole Miss beat BYU, has a win over Iowa State, over Kansas. Ole Miss lost at the very last second to the Purdue Boilermakers. Outside the conference, Ole Miss matches up pretty well. Like I said, I just genuinely think that Ole Miss needs to try to avoid 1 seeds as much as possible. And hopefully by the time you get to that point, Florida has dropped a game to McNeese State or whoever on that side.
That'd be crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens every year though.
Yeah. That one gets out of the line because Ole Miss would match up well with everybody else. And that's how you make a run in the tournament, is by eliminating bad matchups.
Yeah, so we'll see what Chris Beard and Ole Miss do. As far as the matchup Friday at noon, Ole Miss will have their hands full. I think we both agree with that. What needs to happen? What is both teams, like, what do they need to do? All that is next right here on this crossover edition of Locked On Auburn and Locked On Ole Miss. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Nissan. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. The numbers are on an MVP level. Steven, with the ability to tow 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever you need to go. And it's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel, of course, America's #1 sportsbook. Steven, right now, as we record this, Auburn is a 10.5-point favorite over Ole Miss. That number is ginormous to me. In this tournament, 10 points seems crazy to me.
Yeah, it's a situation where I think Auburn wins the game. Auburn's the best team in the best conference in the history of basketball. Auburn's likely going to be the favorite. I don't know if they're 10-point favorites.
10.5 in this tournament right now?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not touching that.
Chris Beard in tournament basketball is dangerous because they lock you down and they make scoring to the point where you can't separate from them. Arkansas basically spent 10 minutes of the game stretching out and trying to go and building a 7-point lead, but they could not extend that lead. And that's the reason Ole Miss was able to come back in winning time.
Yeah. So if you feel strong about this one way or the other, head over to FanDuel.com and get in on our college hoops action all tournament long. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn and Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every single day. For your second listen, go check out our guys, Isaac and Andy over at Locked On College Basketball. They will make sure you are equipped with all of the knowledge before the brackets drop on Sunday. Steven, I want to ask you, what do you think the dynamic of Ole Miss now playing their second game in 2 days against an Arkansas team where they had to expend every ounce of energy to win that game, came down to a last-second shot? How does that impact Friday's matchup?
I think you're going to see a more freer team. playing against Auburn than you've seen in the previous 2 matchups, because this is the freest shot of free shots in the history of the world going up against Auburn. Hopefully, like me and Zach said last time, you can put pressure on Auburn to the point where they feel it and all of the expectations they have. You want to turn that into a weapon that you can use against them. I think this time Ole Miss doesn't have we need to win this game. We have to, because we're on a losing streak, or that is happening. So I think this is a chance to where if Ole Miss loses the game against Auburn, they go home, get ready for March Madness and all of that. We talk about them on bracket breakdown, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But if you come out there and you just have a free shot, just let it all hang out, you can be a pretty dangerous team. And tournaments are littered with teams like that having success.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Auburn wins this game. The first thing I want to see is if I don't know if I almost said the big 3. I don't really know how you would classify that, but like Janai Broome, it seems like down the stretch he was struggling with a shoulder situation. He was constantly grabbing his shoulder a few times throughout the game. Does that extra time off, like, did he get a little bit more fresh? Denver Jones, we mentioned, he missed the Texas A&M game. He played fine against Alabama, but he had a wrap on whenever he was sitting on the sideline. Does Denver Jones look more fresh? And then not to Hod Pettiford, but Chad Baker-Mazara kept grabbing his back. Alabama kept kind of doing kidney shots on him, just elbowing him, and shockingly wasn't called.
Life is rough for an MMA fighter. I mean, it's really rough.
Way to make the joke. Yeah, just getting wailed on, and whenever you fight back, it's just never called. But not defending what he did. But it is wild how the officiating throughout the conference only protects certain people. It doesn't protect everyone, but that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. But I want to see, like, from a health standpoint, what those guys look like early, because I think that'll kind of tell how the game's going to go pretty quickly.
Yeah, and one of the biggest mismatch is probably the Florida Bigs versus Ole Miss, but the second biggest mismatch is the Auburn Bigs versus Ole Miss, and it's not necessarily Janai Broome. Janai Broome's the best player in all of college basketball. It's the other big man that's the problem for Ole Miss. He's the one that gives them problems and causes all sorts of stuff because of his athleticism and rebounding and all that. And once they take over the rebounding advantage, it's over. I tell people all the time, Ole Miss needs to be less than -10 in the rebounding battle in a game. You need to not lose the rebounding battle by 10 or less, and then not turn the ball over. When Ole Miss is very judicious and good with the basketball, they can make it up. Whenever you have a mauling in the rebounding stage and you turn it over 12 times, you're not going to win a basketball game.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because it's kind of been labeled like Auburn's 2 major weaknesses right now. One is the emotional fortitude of Chad Baker-Mazara, and the other is rebounding. And Auburn down the stretch, it seems like they've gotten worse at rebounding, and I'm sure the scouting reports out there, Bruce Pearl's talked about it, but if you're physical around the rim, sometimes we don't match it. And that counts Janai Broome, Dylan Cardwell, Chaney Johnson, the collection of big men that you just talked about, Stephen. There's times where they don't always match it. And so does Ole Miss have the personnel to do that to Auburn? I don't know. The first 2 outings, the answer to that has been no, but we'll see. We'll see if this third time is the charm for Chris Beard and Ole Miss.
Well, Dre Davis has gotten into foul trouble in both games against Auburn. And Dre Davis is the key to a physical rebounder in the game. So if he avoids foul trouble, you could see it look a little bit different. But when he gets into foul trouble and gets off the floor, Malik Dia has a chance to do all the bully ball stuff that you can think of. He just doesn't do it.
Right.
It's a weird situation and extremely frustrating. So if Dre Davis can get himself out of foul trouble and play the game, Ole Miss has a chance to be a little bit more competitive like the first game as opposed to the second one.
Where are you with guards? I mean, it's no secret that you win in March largely because of your guard play. And Auburn's guard play down the stretch, I think, has gotten significantly better. Some of that has to do with Miles Kelly being fully healthy. The Georgia Tech transfer was battling a wrist injury to start the season. It seems like he's finally 100%. He's shooting the ball incredibly well. Same with Denver Jones when he's played. Then, of course, Tahad Pettiford has been, one of the freshman phenoms in this conference. He's been electric, and he also plays his best when the lights are the brightest. And so I'm personally expecting Tahad Pettiford to really come on in March, maybe more so in the NCAA tournament than the SEC tournament, just because he's big game. Tahad, does he count this as a big game or not? I don't know. We'll see. But I think the guard play for Auburn is certainly something that we'll have to all keep an eye on.
Yeah, Sean Pedulla is obviously a fantastic player. Hit the buzzer beater against Arkansas today. Hit a last-second shot against Oklahoma. He's somebody that is very clutch when the lights are the brightest. And Juju Murray is kind of picking it up. Okay. I think that Ole Miss and Auburn have some similarities at guard. The difference is Auburn's a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. They're a little bit longer at those positions, but they offer a lot of the same type stuff. Matthew Morrell, if he was healthy, Ole Miss is a different team, and they're kind of as goes Matthew Morrell, as goes Ole Miss because of the athleticism that he has. But he's basically having a knee right now that's being held together by bubble gum and duct tape. And because of that, Ole Miss isn't quite as athletic on the field, so they're having to do a lot of the little stuff to be successful as opposed to the explosive athletic stuff that Matthew Morrell has been known for in the past. I mean, he's laying up the ball now. He's not even dunking. He can't even get up there at the moment, but he's still being tasked with guarding the best player on the other team. He's just a warrior. And if Ole Miss makes a run in the NCAA basketball tournament, I'm not even joking about this, they need to put a statue outside the pavilion of him.
Hey, I'm all for statues. Mm-hmm. I'm all for building statues. Just knee-jerk reaction statues. I mean, Janai might get one. Bruce Pearl might get one. We'll see. Let's just build statues for everybody. Yeah. No, I think Pedulla, I'm curious to see, because like he really didn't play well today. It's just he made the last shot.
Yeah, he played really bad for 39 minutes and then hit a game winner buzzer beater.
Yeah, so when Denver Jones is on, I'm like, what does that look like on Friday? I know we talked a lot about the bigs a second ago, but like that might be the matchup of the game, honestly.
Yeah, the first matchup he had 29 points. Mm-hmm. The second matchup he had 10 or something like that.
The big difference.
Yeah, it's a major difference, and that's probably the difference in the scoreline. You remove those 19 points from one to the other, it's basically the same.
That's about it. Yeah. And so, can Denver Jones do that? Denver Jones was named as a semifinalist for the, whatever the defensive player of the year is. So we'll see exactly how he responds. And let's keep an eye on that ankle. It looked fine against Alabama. Should be better with more time off, but that Denver Jones ankle, let's certainly watch it in this one. All right, let's give our official picks and predictions and who to watch and, hey, maybe who wins the entire SEC tournament. Let's jump into that all in just a second right here on this crossover edition of Locked on Auburn and Locked on Ole Miss. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Steven, I love Monarch Money. It does several different things. It tracks your spending. And with how, you just kind of give your debit card to everybody, your credit card everywhere, you're ordering food, or you're ordering gifts or whatever it might be, it's really easy to lose track of all of it. And Monarch Money helps you with all of it.
Yeah, you get notifications on your phone. I've been on with Monarch Money for a couple of weeks now, kind of seeing how it goes. And I really like how it kind of melds together your finances on both levels of your checking account and your investment account and stuff like that. It's really kind of a command center more so than a budgeting app.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it brings everything onto one screen. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege, for half off of your first year. Final few moments here. It's this crossover edition of Locked on Auburn, Locked on Ole Miss. If you're not subscribed to either of our shows, please do that. Really helps both of our channels out a ton. And if you're tuning in on audio, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe there. Once again, helps the show out. We are eternally grateful for all of you. We mentioned it earlier. FanDuel has Auburn as a 10.5 point favorite, over under at 154.5. I think Auburn wins. I'm not going to pick them to win by 10 just because of the nature of March and the nature of neutral sites and also the nature that I don't always think it's a disadvantage that Ole Miss had to play Thursday and then quickly turn around and play on Friday. I don't think it's always a disadvantage. So, maybe Ole Miss is feeling itself. Maybe Auburn's taking an extra day off. I don't know. We'll see exactly how that plays out. I got a feeling we'll know pretty early, but the way Auburn plays is they're going to try to wear Ole Miss out. But Ole Miss is perfectly comfortable running. I just think Auburn is better at that style of basketball than Ole Miss is. And I think the fact that Ole Miss did play on Thursday will benefit Auburn in all of this.
I think Ole Miss in this game needs to channel some Pete Carroll and just slow it down and try and Auburn wants to get out and run. You need to slow the tempo down, make it a very herky-jerky type game. Because
I get that.
If you think about this, when you have the SEC tournament in Nashville, it is 90% Kentucky fans in that building. And those Kentucky fans are not going to be rooting for Auburn in that game. So you have a chance at a little bit of a home court advantage to kind of cheer you on from what's going on. But if you get into a running match with them, you're not going to be able to keep up. They shoot the ball too well.
I think, Stephen, there's going to be a ridiculous amount of Auburn fans there.
I think they're going to have a good one, but Kentucky is still in the tournament. They bought SEC tournament tickets in February before everybody else thought to do it. Yeah. I mean, Auburn's going to be very well represented, but at best, at the absolute
But Kentucky
best,
plays the night game, correct? Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, they'll play, what, like 8 hours later?
Yeah. But those crazy people will be in the building. There was Kentucky fans at the Arkansas Ole Miss game today.
People.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous.
They do love them some basketball.
Yeah, they call it Catsville or something like that. And they just completely take over. That place went nuts.
How do we feel about that
Pedulla.
name, Catsville? How do we feel about that?
Not very good. I tried it on. It didn't work. It's kind of like Start Vegas to me. I just like, no, that's dumb.
Yeah, I got in trouble with what I used to call Starkville. I can't say it anymore. So
is it named after a country?
Yeah,
I know that one.
Yeah, I got an email about that one. I had to stop. So so I think Auburn wins. I think Janai Broome will be the leading scorer for both teams, and I think Tahad Pettiford has a few moments that kind of like separate it. That's my prediction. If we're getting a little bit more specific.
If you want to get specific, I think if Auburn shoots below 40% from 3-point range, Ole Miss wins the game. If Auburn shoots above 40%, Auburn wins the game.
40% is kind of high.
Not whenever Auburn plays Ole Miss. That'd be like a 10% drop.
Okay. All right. We'll see.
I've never seen a team throw up 50% from three two games in a row.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about Chris Beard saying that Florida should be the #1 overall seed? Do you think there's any fuel there for Auburn there? Or do you think they even care?
I think after what he saw Florida do to Ole Miss, he probably really believes it. He saw Auburn twice, but
it's just wild though.
Zach,
because after
you saw Florida too. You saw Florida too.
Sure, Florida's good. No doubt about it.
Really good. It's
just wild though. Like Chris Beard just loves gassing up the teams that just light them up, I guess. Because after the game in Auburn, where Auburn won by a lot, it was he's like, yeah, they could have named their score. Honest, we didn't have an answer or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like, all right. And then Florida does the same thing to you, and it's like, okay, like maybe I don't know, maybe just like you said, just avoid the 1 seeds at all costs. I guess just avoid the elite teams, and we'll see what happens for Ole Miss.
Yes. That 6th seed is the Goldilocks zone. And the worst thing that could happen in this game potentially is beating Auburn and moving up to the 5 line.
Did you name it the Goldilocks zone, or is that some term I've never heard before?
That's something I named it.
Great name. I think
just
you did
right.
a great job. I think it's just right. Yeah, sure. Well done, Stephen Willis. Well done. All right. Any final thoughts on this? Oh, who wins the tournament if you had to pick right now?
I'm going to go with Florida.
Sounds like it. Sounds like you really love Florida.
Yeah. Listen, the thing that is scary about Florida, you can be playing so well, and you look up and you're down 36-32, like with the under 8 timeout or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you go to the under 4 timeout and you're down by 17, and you're like, what just happened?
Sure. Yeah. Life comes at you quick, for sure.
Yeah. And when that in a tournament is going to be an interesting situation. The good news is for Auburn fans, for Ole Miss fans, for everybody else, you're not going to have to see Florida likely in the tournament until way down the line because of the way it's set up. And there's an opportunity for them to have one of those magical March Madness moments. Like today, Sean Pedulla hits a buzzer beater to beat Arkansas, and everybody's like, hey, here's the Valparaiso Ole Miss highlights from 1998 of Bryce Drew hitting the buzzer beater. It's like, that's terrorism. That is absolutely terrorism, and you need to be prosecuted by Homeland Security.
Okay. All right. There you go. There you go. I think we get an Iron Bowl matchup in the championship. I think it's an Auburn-Alabama matchup in the SEC Tournament championship. So we'll see.
I'm
see.
sneakily thinking now, thanks that Cooper Flagg getting injured today, maybe that Duke doesn't make it past the round of 32 or something like that. But all Greg Sankey and everybody in the SEC are so scared that it would be like an Iowa State-Houston matchup.
Oh, that's like the worst case scenario for the conference for sure. Yeah, I mean, we talked all this smack all year about how great we are, and it's like we only get like one team in the Final Four or something. Like, yikes!
Yeah, and it's like Oklahoma.
That'd be crazy. That'd be crazy. But that's college basketball for you.
Danny Cannell would look like Randy from South Park after that.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
Like I understood what some of that was, but
yeah, people watching this know what that means.
Yeah, sure. Just never watched South Park. Never got into it. Stephen Willis, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Locked On Ole Miss on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Like Zach says, give us a 5-star review and rate us and all of that. We'd appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at @TheStephenWillis. Should be fun. I'm glad to have you. Even you Auburn folks, I like it when you guys come around.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Love the crossover action. We'll have a lot of it throughout the network over the next few weeks for sure. Yeah, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you want more Auburn coverage, check out Locked On Auburn, the same place you check out Locked On Ole Miss. Please like our shows. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time. This has been a crossover edition of Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Auburn.